Hello, everyone. It's Michael Zipursky, and today I'm here with Tom Critchlow. Tom, welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
So, Tom, you're an independent strategy consultant, and your clients include the New York Times, Gucci, Complex, Fundera. You worked even with Google. Take us back. How did you get into this business?
Yeah, it's a kind of a meandering path. So I got started working in SEO. My brother started a digital agency called Distilled. This is back in the UK, and I kind of helped grow that agency, working alongside him from doing SEO for like restaurants and hairdressers, businesses just down the road that we could kind of knock on the door. But we were kind of at the right time, at the right place, and quickly scaled up to doing SEO for kind of national chains in the UK, Amazon
Mm.
UK, kind of big retailers, people like that. And then 2011, I moved to New York, and I opened up the New York office for my brother's company, Distilled, and that was really eye-opening for me. Kind of did two things. One was it gave me a chance to kind of manage a team and open an office under my own steam, so almost feeling like I had my own business, but with a paycheck, which was nice. But then also kind of opened my eyes to the things going on in New York and some of the interesting kind of digital marketing and kind of broader digital landscape that was happening. And so, I kind of had got my start in SEO over the years, but then quickly realized that there was a bigger world out there, there were kind of bigger fish to be fried. The SEO was only a piece of the puzzle, and that increasingly, the digital landscape was changing, content marketing and PR and just general kind of digital strategy were all kind of evolving and maturing. And so I made the leap to go work at Google for a couple of years, and I worked at a team there called the Creative Lab, where I did some things that I'd never done before, like run some TV ads and work on some weird and wonderful projects, and did that for a couple of years. And then, yeah, for the last 5 years, I've been out on my own doing digital strategy consulting, which is lots of different things depending on who the client is and who's trying to pay me. It definitely overlaps very strongly with my background, which is content marketing and SEO. So most businesses that I work with have a kind of foundation in some kind of scaled content, whether they're a traditional media company like the New York Times, or whether they're just a company like Gartner, for example, which you wouldn't think of as a media company, but produces a huge amount of content across their various business units. And the work that I do, I like to think of myself as a one-man consultant. Well, I am a one-man consultant, but one of the things that I think is different versus hiring an agency, which is often one of the kind of competing paths when clients are looking for help, is that I like to be very embedded with clients. So a lot of my work is literally in the office 1, 2, 3 days a week, and I'll try and kind of become an extension of the team, try and embed myself very heavily in all parts of the business, and then really stick around for as long as I can. So a lot of my clients end up being 18-month, 2-year engagements. And, that gives me the satisfaction of really getting to understand an industry, getting to understand a client, and feel like I can make a difference in their business. So yes, that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack there, and a lot that I want to dig into. Your time at Google, coming over from the UK to New York, and building kind of the office there for that SEO company that you and your brother had. But you just mentioned something really interesting, which is you try to embed yourself very deeply into your clients' organizations or companies. When you do that, how do you ensure that you are able to consistently work on your marketing? Because it sounds like you're working kind of in the business, right, for your clients. But then how do you ensure that you're still working on your business while you're so deep in with them?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something that I've definitely kind of struggled with or gone back and forth on over the years. Most of the marketing work that I do for my own business is on my blog, so I write somewhat actively on there. And for the past year or so, I've really been making an active effort to kind of put together some writings that are eventually going to become a book targeted at other independent consultants. And the good thing about writing about consulting is that every consulting engagement gives me, fodder for the book. So every time I'm on site with a client, I'm either actively or passively, getting inspiration and ideas for things to write about, challenges that I'm coming across, things that I'm facing. Finding time to write, of course, is a different matter. And when I get very busy, my writing goes down. And when I get slow, my writing goes up. So if you actually went and look at the timestamps of all of my blog posts, you could pretty accurately chart how busy I've been over the years. So, I don't know if I've got any magic tips. I definitely feel that kind of feast or famine pressure a little bit of,
You do? Okay.
When I'm busy with work, blogging necessarily takes a backseat.
Got it.
The good news is that I've built up a body of writing now that at least has some kind of passive activity. There's enough writing there and enough content that people are finding it on their own, people are sharing it on their own. So even when I'm not writing new things, some of it is still put to work. So yeah, but it's definitely a challenge, and one that I haven't always kind of found the right balance on.
It's interesting, like content. I think, and I've talked about this a little bit on other podcasts with guests as well. Like, the idea of content, it's a real investment, right, of time and commitment. But if you do it properly, then you win long term. It's not going to necessarily be the result that you want like tomorrow or next week or even next month. But you fast forward many months down the road or even years down the road, right, and you can still be benefiting from that. So clearly, I mean, what you're doing is working for you to be able to land some pretty prestigious clients. Let's go back. When you said that you went from the UK to New York, it reminded me of the time many years ago when I went to Japan and opened up a branch office for our consulting business over there. So I'm kind of thinking like, we share that. But what I'm really interested to hear, and I think people could benefit from is, so you land in New York. It sounds like you don't know tons of people. You don't have a big client kind of roster yet. What was the first thing that you did at that time to go and actually start winning business for your consultancy?
Yeah. So actually, when I moved to New York, I'd actually never been to New York before. So I was definitely landing fresh. I was lucky that the business Distilled that my brother owns and runs had a pretty good reputation, and they've run conferences around the world, and they've done a lot of their own blogging. I was blogging actively for them at the time, and so I was lucky to kind of land in New York and kind of have enough of a presence to put a call out and say who wants to meet up, and that really was, a kind of a elbow grease and hustle. Just, who wants to grab drinks? I'm going to be out this evening. Who wants to come to this meetup? Okay.
So how do you know those people? These were what relationships you had built from conferences and just
just like industry folks for the most part. That was kind of the very much square one, was connecting with other SEO professionals. The SEO industry is lucky enough, at least back then, to be kind of small enough that I felt like I could, reach out to people either cold or just put a call out and say, who's in New York, who's an SEO, who wants to meet up? And there are already meetups going on. So I went from kind of, meeting a few folks to, in that first year, we hosted a number of our own meetups. So those kind of informal, drinks gatherings that then turned into, all right, we have a couple short presentations a night, more kind of like slightly more formal meetups. And we were getting anywhere between 50 and 100 people would show up to those things. And then eventually, when we started to get a bit more mature, we ran a full-on conference in New York, like a 2-day SEO conference, which again kind of put us on the map. And all of those things combined, added up to clients. I didn't do a lot of outbound sales or direct marketing or anything like that. I was lucky enough to have people through the extended network kind of know who we are and seek us out. We were a pretty small team, so when I opened the office, it was me and 4 employees, and so we didn't, thankfully, we didn't need a ton of business to kind of keep us alive. So once we found those first few clients, then it was like, you flip the switch to being heads down, doing good work for those clients. And
How important do you think it was that you just kind of put out those calls to people and said, hey, like, let's meet up for drinks, let's chat. I'm in from the UK, don't really know anyone here. I think a lot of people kind of look at that and go, yeah, it's like, I don't know. First of all, it's potential competition. If you're meeting with other SEOs, that's what you do. Like, why would you want to connect with them? But I can see there's obviously value in doing that. So what would you say to someone who's just saying, yeah, I want to build up my business, but I'm a little bit hesitant to go out and try and connect with other people in my industry?
I think I'm lucky in the sense that the SEO industry has always been very tight-knit. People have always been pretty open in terms of sharing knowledge and connecting with each other. Certainly in like 2011, it was still very much a boom industry. And so nobody felt, even competitors, direct competitors, other SEO agencies didn't feel particularly threatened. We felt like there was enough work to go around. The business is booming. And so broadly speaking, even though we are competing, and increasingly would appear side by side in pitches and so on, it still felt like there was a kind of camaraderie and closeness. We could hang out for drinks and so on. I think what I will say is that there is a very material difference between going to somebody else's meetup and hosting your own meetup. and that there's kind of an order of magnitude of influence and impact that you can get by doing a ladder. And you know, you kind of have to start by going to other people's, but we very quickly switched to trying to run our own, even though they were small. And that felt like a really good way to approach it, to be able to say, okay, we're gonna put the programming on that we want to see. We're going to do what we're interested in and try and get the momentum behind us to have people come. But it's hard. I mean, it's work. It's a lot. There's no way around it. You know, it's a lot of hustle. And, you know, back then I didn't have a wife or a kid. And so could do a few more of those, like, you know, late evenings drinking and going to random meetups in different parts of the city. And you know, those things that definitely feel a little bit extracurricular to kind of working hours.
Right. So you spent time at Google, I think two plus years or so there. Looking back, what would you say was, you know, one thing that you learned that really made an impact that you continue to benefit from and use today in your business?
Yes. So I worked at a team called the Creative Lab for most of my time at Google, and they're basically like an internal ad agency / innovation unit within Google. And I think the biggest lesson that I learned, or skill that I learned, was how to pitch ideas. So the entire Creative Lab is filled with basically designers, videographers, copywriters, like full of creative talent. I think when I was there was only a single engineer in the whole team. And the whole place ran on ideas. And so your ideas had to be polished, they had to be refined, they had to look and sound and feel incredible, because you are often pitching vaporware, right? You're like, this is an idea we just made up. It exists only in Photoshop. And everyone there had a kind of ad agency background, which is very different to the rest of Google, which is very engineering heavy. And so I learned a lot about how to package ideas, how to present ideas, even just the basics of design, how to design slides, how to design all kinds of things, really, and you know, work alongside very very talented designers and so on, that I hadn't had the exposure to working in the SEO industry. You know, that wasn't as much of a core skill set.
On that topic of design, like it seems like from what I've seen of, you know, of your work and what you're sharing also right now, that you value design, you know, and the power that it can have in relation to your brand and just kind of communicating, positioning you. What are your kind of thoughts on that? Like, how big of a factor do you, you know, do you kind of contribute to design, and how much do you focus on that in terms of the development of your brand?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been a little bit of a design geek. You know, back when I was working in SEO, I always valued it, but had never really taken the time to study it or understand how it works. So I always appreciated it, but couldn't do much of it myself. But it was a time at Google where I felt like I actually had enough pressures. There was a forcing function. You know, if you presented something that didn't look nice, people would just instantly throw it out. And so that was kind of a forcing function to actually actively get better at it and actively work on it. Now I actually find myself often in a very interesting position where, when I'm in a room without designers, I'm often one of the best people at design.
Right.
And that's a really interesting position to be in, because it lets me kind of make like mock-ups or sketch out ideas with a level of fidelity that gets people excited. And I find that's actually a really compelling and powerful concept. I also talk about it the other way, which is when I'm in a room full of CEOs, I'm the one that can code the best. When I'm in a room full of engineers, I'm the one that can present ideas the best. And I always try and find the kind of edge in the room where everyone has the least skill, to be able to stand out or do something differently or present an idea in a new way. And so sometimes that is, you know, making a functioning prototype in a room full of designers who can only make things that look nice, or sometimes it's making something look nice in a room full of people that only work in spreadsheets. But I really value that ability to kind of be a little bit of a shapeshifter or a chameleon and be a bit of a jack of all trades. I definitely wouldn't call myself a designer. I definitely wouldn't call myself a coder, but having enough of those skills to be dangerous, I find it valuable. I find it fun. I think it definitely gets me in trouble sometimes also, when people are like, wait, did you design this? Like, are you a designer? Like, where did this come from? And what am I looking at? Sometimes trips people up, but it helps keep things interesting and creative for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you have a lot going on there, and I think in connection to that, you've been hired by like large media companies, right, to focus on content strategy, mid-sized startups to be an interim CEO, and then also product companies to do kind of like design sprints, right, for their product roadmaps. So those are like three very different types of ideal clients and also different types of offerings. Did you always have the kind of those three distinct offerings? And I guess really what I'm getting at is like, does that cause confusion for you that you have very like three distinct ideal clients that you might serve rather than having, let's say, one? What are your thoughts about that? What have you learned, and yeah, how do you kind of interpret that, or how would you, is that something you would recommend to other consultants?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I'm realizing, and I actually love your thoughts on this, is I think positioning is a bit of a fool's errand in consulting as like a single solo consultant. I think that certainly when I first started out, I was very eager to try and find a kind of market position. You know, I'm the content marketing consultant for media companies of X size, you know, kind of, and I feel like I felt like I had to have a kind of a positioning statement and a very clear, you know, part of the market that I was chasing and so on. And I think what I've learned over the last few years is that that's not why any clients come to me. Clients come to me because they found my writing or somebody recommended me. It tends to be a much more kind of human-led and contact-driven business, and that the positioning almost gets in the way. If I try too hard to either exclude certain types of business or fit a certain project into a certain mold, then I'm almost trying too hard. And the thing that I focus most on is being adept enough to adapt the skill sets that I have into a variety of different situations. So there are definitely some commonalities, and there are definitely some consistent threads between both the clients I've had and the types of work that I've done. But more recently, I've focused much less on positioning and more so just on kind of building a network, building authority, building up a variety of skill sets. And that, for me at least, has worked well, especially with that lens of trying to be embedded inside organizations and do work for long periods of time.
Right.
The number of leads that I need and the number of clients that I can take on at once is very small. And
Right.
so I'm not constantly out hunting for new business. I'm not out hunting for leads. So I think different types of work and different types of consultants have different experiences. But for me, at least, like I said, positioning has kind of been a thing that, feels like an abstract concept more than a useful, tangible benefit.
I think it's a really interesting point because I think the distinction is right now you create this ecosystem where business and opportunities kind of come to you based on the relationships that you've established, the value that you're adding through your writings, and just the network that you've built, which allows you to kind of engage in many different conversations, right, and figure out how can you best serve that marketplace or add value. Whereas for the consultant who doesn't have that ecosystem and kind of network established where they can generate those kinds of inquiries, then they need a point of focus, right? And so that's where getting very clear on who their ideal client is and how they can help them, and distinct kind of set of offerings for that market gives them focus so they can go off and actually get in front of that ideal client. Because if they said, yeah, I can work with these 3 or 4 or 5 different types of industries, organizations, or types of clients, then they'd be spread very thin, right, trying to reach out to them. So I think that's kind of the distinction, and it's good that we're looking at this with you, because I think oftentimes you're right, people are at the stage where they need that focus, but that may not be appropriate for everyone if they already have that network and ecosystem established. I did notice that on your website you talk about workshops as something that you offer. Mm-hmm. Do you find that workshops is for you a way to kind of get your foot into the door with an organization? Is that a typical starting point for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually, it's funny you should talk about that. I'm working on a blog post just about all about workshops right now. Yeah, it feels a little bit like when I stumbled on this technique about 2 years ago, it felt a little bit like cheating. But almost every single client that comes to me, or potential client that comes to me, the thing that I propose first is a workshop. I'm like, let's just get in a room for 2 days. And what that does is a variety of things, from building trust with the client, getting a much better sense of what their actual needs are, understanding who the people are, the stakeholders. But it also is kind of a great opportunity to say, on an hourly or a day rate, it's very well paid work, but the total sticker price is low enough that clients don't have too much trouble signing off on it. But then you've anchored yourself at a kind of nice high day rate, and you're like, all right, everyone's primed now for this to be a kind of a high value, well paid project that is also going to work on the things that actually matter, right? We're not going to put anything in the SOW that is extraneous or like a nice to have, or really just like something that you think you should do. because you're going to spend 2 days in a room really hashing out what the actual problems are. So it's almost like it's a shortcut to a bunch of things. And one of the things that it very directly solves that I've heard as a pain point from other consultants is when I put the SOW together for the kind of long-term retainer or the ongoing retainer, sometimes the SOW will literally be like a one-line, I'll be in your office 2 days a week. Like that's what you're buying. And you don't need any more than that because you already have the trust and the context from the workshop to be able to sign up on that. Whereas if you try and leap to that retainer without having the workshop, you can, it's very easy to get bogged down and be like, well, what are we actually going to get? And how is this actually going to work? And what are you going to work on? And do we know if we can trust you? And so, and that could be a legitimate pain point. It's just that you can kind of get stuck in that SOW phase and either end up, delaying the project or miss scoping the project or over engineering the scope. So then you feel like even once you're in the door, you're working on the wrong kinds of things because that's what you have to put in the SOW and you have to put it in writing. So it feels like a very weird kind of specific thing to get tripped up on. But when I started selling workshops as an entry point, I started doing them first. It really, a lot of things kind of became easier in closing those kind of long-term retainers. So it really started to work well for me.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we call this a discovery offer, and we do a lot of work with our coaching clients on this because it does exactly what you just shared. It lowers kind of the resistance that a buyer typically has, right? Rather than going and trying to sell a $50,000 or $100,000+ engagement, if you're starting off with a $3,000, $5,000, even $10,000 engagement, it's just easier for them to say yes. And then everything that you mentioned there is so key, right? They don't have to think about the complexities of, well, how do we get the most out of this big engagement, and how do we bring all the right people together? And there's just so many different kind of nuances and components that a buyer has to think through if they're going to a bigger engagement. But if you're starting with a discovery offer, like a workshop, it's just easy. It's like, yeah, let's spend a day together, 2 days together, half a day together, and figure things out. This will be the outcome. This will be the kind of the outcome from that day. This is how it'll help you. You get your foot in the door. You can really demonstrate your expertise, right? Show them that you can actually do what you say that you're going to do. Yep. And now that kind of hesitation or resistance or potential risk that they might feel if they haven't yet engaged you into going to a larger project, they don't have that because they actually see that you can deliver the way that you said that you're going to. And so that makes, as you just shared, moving from a workshop into an ongoing engagement or to a larger engagement much, much easier.
Right. Yeah, totally. The one thing I'll also point out there is, and I think this suits different people in different ways, but the thing that works for me is that those workshops very much like, they're more like free jazz jam sessions than kind of prescribed, we'll spend the morning doing this and the afternoon doing this, and there'll be exercises with sticky notes and blah, blah, blah. Like, I put as much structure and prep into the workshop as the client needs. And some clients want to see more. But where I can get away with it, or where the client is happy with it, we'll have like a 1-pager outline of what we're going to talk about. And then we just get in a room and we just jam. We just talk through all of the things. And I approach that in the same way that I approach any kind of consulting engagement, which is, the first thing you got to do is ask a ton of questions. You just have to ask, like, how does the business work? Well, how many people do you have, and who runs that? And what have you tried previously? And why do you not do this? And why doesn't it work that way? And, just everything, to be like a sponge to soak up all of the context. Along the way, you'll necessarily end up adding value. Like, there'll be some obvious kind of things that will fall out of that workshop, or at least that's been my experience. But the biggest thing that you learn is just you end up with kind of such a clear roadmap and kind of articulation of what the problems are. And so those can be very simple as well. And that's the other thing is, trying to sell a big consulting contract off the bat for what sounds like a very trivial problem is hard. Mm-hmm. But where you spent 2 days talking about the problem and realize that it's a hard, simple problem. Like, we don't have somebody running that part of the business, for example. And you're like, well, that's a very easy thing to articulate. Mm-hmm. Solving it, on the other hand, is not, it's not going to get solved overnight. That's, you either need some recruitment, or you need some training, or you need some strategy, or you need me to come in and lead that part of the business for a bit. Like, there's no kind of easy answer, but the problem is incredibly straightforward. You're like, oh, like, yes, like we now have some clarity and some kind of we've agreed on this very core single point of failure, and so let's just address that and attack that.
Yeah, because oftentimes, right, consultants will find that if they're speaking with a buyer, the buyer doesn't necessarily know what the issue is. They don't know what the value is, and right. So it's very hard then to go to a larger engagement because they haven't yet really felt like they understand the value. So by getting together, kind of going through whatever that discovery offer is, whether it's a workshop or some kind of audit or an assessment that someone does with the client, right? That helps both parties to better identify and then communicate the value to each other. And that just leads to typical like greater success moving forward. So I want to also look at one other thing here. You mentioned that you're the independent consultant, right? Has that always been intentional for you? Like, did you ever consider building a company, going back to like what you were doing with your brother, where you had more of an agency so that you could get bigger, take larger projects, grow revenue, all of that kind of stuff that a lot of people desire? Clearly you haven't gone down that path. Tell us why, and then, just any kind of background to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a part of it, which is having run an agency previously. I know how hard it is, and I've kind of got no desire to go do that again. It's kind of the devil, sometimes is kind of the thing that stops you. I think that, especially early on, I definitely considered it and thought about bringing on either partners and or employees. But the more that I realized that I could do so much of it myself, and that there weren't obvious kind of gaps in the value that I could offer to clients, the more that I realized that the lifestyle it affords me is very valuable. The ability to be my own boss and not feel beholden to either an office or employees, or even just like the overhead of keeping those kind of wages coming in. And then my daughter is she's about 3.5, and so the last, while she's been young for the last few years, it's just been great to have that flexible schedule, be able to take time off either to be around family or for doctor's visits or whatever it might be. So that's kind of been a big focus for me, is being able to balance the lifestyle and the kind of personal life needs and things that I value whilst running the business. So it was an intentional decision in the sense that this path that I'm on seems to work. I'm definitely not ruling it out. I've definitely thought about bringing on partners in particular, or kind of even launching kind of joint venture partnerships in addition to the consulting work that would be, we might have a team that would be better designed for certain types of projects or whatever. But again, I've been lucky enough to be kind of busy enough with the work that I have and being able to kind of be somewhat self-sufficient. And so it's just kind of worked out well for me.
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're not able to win or kind of have an advantage, on a piece of work because you don't have that team? Like, I know that's just, for a lot of people, it's a mindset thing. It's just a belief that, oh no, I can't win that business with that big company because I'm just me, myself and I don't have a big team around me. I don't have, all this other stuff that these other consulting firms have. What's been your experience with that? And specifically in terms of winning business at large organizations, because you have clients that are large organizations.
Yeah. I think because of the nature of the way that I get work, that hasn't been a problem.
You mean mainly because people are coming to you versus you going to them?
Exactly, because the leads kind of are in almost all instances kind of warm leads or warm referrals.
Right.
And I get talking to the people. I'd say almost every piece of work that I work on has very few competitors. Like the alternative to hiring me is usually hiring a full-time employee, or not doing the work, more
Right.
so than like another agency or another consultant. It's not usually very competitive. So I think there are definitely instances where I could imagine being unable to kind of close a big piece of work if the project came along or if the client came along. That said, I've done a pretty good job, I think, especially over the last year or so, of working with trusted partners. So there's like some designers that I work with, some copywriters. I've worked with some other strategists and kind of pulled people in on projects where I needed to. To date, every time I've done that, they've always been billed like through the client. So I haven't kind of passed any of their revenue through my business, but I basically, I get in the client first, and then use the client's money to pull in other contractors, and being able to talk confidently and competently about being able to do that, being able to assemble a team, has definitely helped me kind of do some bigger pieces of work. But in terms of kind of winning the business or losing work, it hasn't really been a thing for me. But again, I think that's a function of how I get leads.
And what's been your mindset and kind of the reason behind, because I think people will be wondering if you're assembling these other, people, these other kind of resources and experts to help with a client project, why not run that all through your business? And then, one, either just be the source of everything, you're building your brand and capabilities, but also potentially for some people, they would charge an additional, fee on that and earn some upside on it. Why have you not done that?
Um, I honestly, I think simplicity. Like, I think it's just been so much more straightforward to do it. To treat the way that I get paid as the client paying me directly.
Yeah.
That's how I get my money, and then bringing in other consultants or other designers or other specialists is just a kind of value adds the consulting work that I'm doing. I also haven't done enough of it, I don't think, where that's like, I've definitely flirted with it a little bit where I'm like, oh, actually in hindsight, maybe I could have brought that designer in through my own business and added a markup and et cetera, et cetera. But I just haven't quite done enough of it. And it hasn't been core enough to the work that I'm doing that it felt like a big missed opportunity. And I really appreciate everything about my business runs incredibly lean. I don't have an office. I basically just have like a laptop. That's kind of my only expense, really.
Right.
And so being able to kind of keep my business overhead and admin and just kind of headspace of running the business low has been a big value add for me. So in theory, I can imagine leaving some money on the table, and maybe it's a thing that I'll do a bit more of in the future, especially now that I've done a few more of these kind of product design sprints in particular. It's the kind of work that I could imagine kind of pitching for upfront. Mm-hmm. And if I'm pitching for it upfront, then it makes a bit more sense, I think, to kind of bundle the total cost together and then pass the costs through to one kind of billing provider, which would be my business, and so on. So I can definitely imagine a world where I'll start doing more of that, but it hasn't really been a thing for me so far.
Got it. So, you mentioned about kind of that one alternative to you, or one consideration aside from bringing you in that a client would have, is bringing someone in full time. And this is something that, we hear from time to time with clients in our coaching program, that they're going out to try and win business. And then the buyer is saying, well, we could go with consultants, but we're also just thinking maybe we should just bring someone internally and have them full time. We want to build up that capability. What's been your experience? I mean, what kind of best practices can you share for the consultant that is facing a situation where the buyer is interested in working with them, but they're maybe leaning towards just bringing in someone full time? How can they position that or communicate the value of actually working with a consultant over someone coming in full time?
Yeah. So I've been in that situation a number of times, where I've come in as a consultant and then either got replaced by a full-time employee, or that's been the consideration between myself and a full-time employee. I see it very much as a compliment. So even if you're going to bring in a full-time employee to be, let's say, a VP of marketing or a CMO, there's a value in having a consultant do some work first, for two kind of core reasons that I think of. One is speed. So typically I can start on Monday or soon, depending on my availability, but often there's a way to get started very quickly. And two, by doing some work ahead of time, you often find you have a better articulation of what you need in that full-time employee. And I see this quite a lot, especially for companies who are hiring their VP of marketing or CMO for the first time. So their kind of first senior marketing hire is like, I think a lot of companies and a lot of startups imagine it's like hiring a unicorn. They're like, I've never seen one. I don't know how they work. I don't know what they do, but I think we need one. And so trying to hire a VP of marketing when you've never had one with no marketing knowledge in-house is terrifying, and you're almost certainly going to mess it up. And so having a consultant both do some of that work quickly, but also define what that role should be and have some of that expertise, and then hire a full-time employee makes a lot of sense. And I've done that in both, either I help bring in the VP of marketing and then step away, or I bring in the VP of marketing and then stick around. I've done it both ways, where either I replace myself and we're kind of, okay, that worked well, but I'm done, or I replace myself and then move on to other things. There's kind of I always remind people that once you're inside a client's business, there's a never-ending set of challenges. You never run out of things to do, and so as long as you're smart enough about grabbing those opportunities and embedding yourself inside the organization to see those opportunities, there's always more stuff to be done. So that's often been the case. Is I'll often just stick around in some capacity.
Yeah. So you have a lot going on between your work and writing and family stuff. What do you find, and kind of what habits have you created that you do on a daily basis that allows you to work at kind of high levels of performance, but also maintain good concentration and focus?
Oh boy, that's a great question. I don't get up early in the morning, or at least not by choice. My daughter gets me up early, but I'm not a kind of a morning person by nature, which I know is kind of that's the first rule of of success when you look at LinkedIn, is get up early in the morning. But I'm not a morning
Yeah.
person. I think exercise definitely helps, so I definitely try and fit in an exercise routine where I can. I just went to a kung fu class today, actually during the day, which kind of helps me. Just I think that's kind of if you had a way of measuring peak consulting performance, which I'm not sure you ever would have a way of measuring, but if you had a way of measuring, I think exercise would be probably one of the most correlated things.
Yeah.
So I try and get exercise, I try and get sleep, both of those things pending having a small child, which disrupts both of those patterns. And then I think actually the process of writing my book, and kind of treating the practice of consulting as a kind of discipline to be studied or examined in that way, I think has actually been very beneficial for my consulting work, because it really helps me question the paths not taken. There's a strong, I'm able to, or I've trained myself well to constantly look and say, how could I have done that work differently?
Mm.
Which I think is a thing that you often forget to do, especially when A, you're the only one doing the work, and B, you're trying to manage a million different things and win clients and do work and et cetera, et cetera. But, thinking critically about, I just presented that big strategy piece and I put it in front of the CEO and everyone seems kind of happy, but could I have done that differently and how would it have looked like? And what is great about being embedded inside organizations is that the paths not taken are incredibly varied. It's like, well, I could have presented it to the CTO first and then put it in front of the CEO, or I could have not done a presentation at all. I could have done like a pilot project, or I could have not done either of those things. I could have just, brought in an external consultant or specialist to help, or I could have, there are so many different ways to try and get to the same result. And so, having the writing practice has really helped me try and think critically through those decision trees, and really question what I'm doing, which I think has been a healthy practice and has helped me spot some very concrete things in my own work where I'm like, oh, right, even though the client was quite happy with that work or that project, I definitely think I would do it differently next time.
Right.
And so I think that's, it's not necessarily a kind of a daily habit, and there's no, other than the kind of the writing output, there isn't really a kind of routine associated with it. But training myself to try and do that self-reflection and introspection, I think has been really useful for my work.
Yeah, I think that it's a really great point, because a lot of people, like, people are busy, right, and don't often slow things down enough to actually give thought to, like, real kind of deep, meaningful thought as to what's working, how can things be better, different, and so people just run and kind of keep things moving, but then don't allow themselves to kind of slow down so they can actually speed up, right? Slow down so they can find the things that are working best and eliminate the things that aren't working, and that's, I think, where typically the greatest improvements happen. But if you're just running, as they often say, kind of like with a chicken with its head cut off, you're not going to make real progress, right? But if you're able to just be thoughtful about what you're doing and create a little bit of time for yourself, it's, I think, typically why you see people who take some time, whether it's holidays or even a day off or a half day off or whatever, to just think about their business and think about strategy, or go away and go to a different environment, or go to the nature, out for a walk, things like that actually help you to slow your daily kind of activities and existence down. That's going to help you to see a lot clearer and bring a lot more energy to the work you'll be doing, going forward.
Right. Yeah, and I think also there's I think the SEO industry actually really trained me well, because I think it's true today still, but especially back in the early days of SEO, there was a reputation in the industry for agencies and consultants that would deliver like audit documents that would just sit on a shelf and never get implemented. And
Sure.
there were these kind of very dense and kind of, theoretically complete and correct documents that never got implemented, that were either too technical for the client or too irrelevant for the client or not prioritized well enough or whatever. And so at Distilled, my brother's agency that I worked at, we always kind of prided ourselves on trying to get past the deliverable to the outcome, and really like holding ourselves accountable to make sure the client actually did the things that we recommended.
Yeah.
And that focus, I think, has been really useful because when you actually look at the set of things that you've recommended over the last 6-12 months and the set of things that have actually got done over the same time period, and you think critically about that gap, and you're like, well, like, even if I delivered work that people were happy with, if it didn't get done, if it didn't go anywhere, then it wasn't good enough, right? It's kind of there's a standard there, which is like something went wrong somewhere. And I think that, it's easy to throw your hands up and blame others, to say, well, their CTO left halfway through the project. What was I supposed to do? Or like,
so Tom, what have you found? Because I think this is a really, like, we could have a whole session just on this topic. A lot of people find this, right? They'll deliver an assessment, an audit, whatever it might be, and the client doesn't actually take action on it. Is there one thing or a couple things you could just very briefly share that you found that helped you guys to be able to get clients to implement on those recommendations?
If I had to sum it up in one word, it would be context. And
what do you mean by that?
The context of the work that you're doing. So every piece of work, every department, every project, every team member sits within some kind of circle of context, right? And I actually wrote about this in a recent blog post. But let's say that you're redesigning the marketing website, for example. And so when you're doing that project, you're very focused on all the things you need to do. It's like a new website needs to be made. We need some copy. We need to understand our goals. We need to set up measurement and tracking, blah, blah, blah. But if the company is just about to acquire another business, then everywhere from the board to the executive team down their focus can get radically shifted overnight. And
Sure.
If you're not aware of that context, then you have no idea what's going on. And when you deliver the new marketing website and nothing happens for 6 months, you're sat there being like, well, I did my job. I did it well, like it was good and it met all the goals that I was aware of, but you just had this missing context. And so whenever I'm doing work, I always, as best as I can, it's always, it's a never ending game, but as best I can, understand all of the various competing contexts for the business
So if let's say that was happening, there was like an acquisition or a merger or whatever, right? So there's something else going on. What would you then do differently? Like, what could someone then do to ensure that the client doesn't just get the website and do nothing with it, or, get everything and not launch the code? Like what step could someone take to ensure that the client actually implements, given that there might be other distractions or things going on in the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is just not being precious about the work, and if especially if you're kind of several steps down inside the organization, being able to say, oh, right, well, priorities that were true yesterday are not priorities that are true today. Maybe we don't need that marketing website anymore, or maybe we just need to put up a landing page, or maybe we just need to change the copy on the existing site, and kind of being nimble enough or agile enough to try and adapt to the changing priorities actually wins you a huge amount of favor inside an organization, right? Being able to say, oh, like, actually, yeah, I've been working 6 months on this website, but what you need tomorrow is a landing page for an entirely different thing that seems irrelevant. Okay, sure, yeah, let me do that for you, because it's going to tick your box that you need to show your boss that the integration is happening or the acquisition is possible or whatever it might be. So I always think about what those contexts are, and it sounds ridiculous to say it out loud, but just ask for that. Like literally train yourself to ask the client, what do I not know about the business? What else is going on? What are you working on that isn't what we're working on together? And just ask those questions, and don't be ashamed of them. I think some people are like, it's not my place to ask those things, or the client will be annoyed if I'm asking for these irrelevant things, blah, blah, blah. But I think you'd be surprised at how much a complete picture of a business can help you with the work that is in front of you, as well as help you understand when those things are changing.
It's really like shifting from being a vendor or a provider to being a partner, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a really powerful dynamic. Tom, I want to thank you for coming on, sharing some of your story and wisdom over the years that you've collected here and assembled. I want to make sure that people can learn more about your work, and I know the book isn't out yet, but when it is. So where's the best place for them to go? TomCritchlow.com is where it all goes on. I'm pretty active on Twitter as well, so just Tom Critchlow on Twitter. Both those places are kind of where I put out my thinking. And I'm in New York, so anyone in New York who wants to grab a coffee, I'm always up for that. Always down for making new friends and talking about indie consulting. So yeah, but thanks so much for having me on the podcast. It was a blast. I really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, my pleasure. We'll have all that up in the show notes. Again, thanks so much, Tom.
Great. Thanks. Take care.